Good morning, everyone. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again. It is Saturday at about 11:12. Another beautiful day. The weather has been pretty awesome here in Maine, and it's been super hot. It's been like a second wave of summer all of a sudden. It's pretty cool. I love the heat. I love these temperatures. I just always I always feel a little bit more, I don't know, kind of energized when it's a little bit hotter out and whatnot. So this next show that I'm going to do today is kind of part of this, big series on all the films of my all-time, my favorite director of all time. That is Stanley Kubrick. I did a show on him quite a few months ago this year where I just tried to focus on him as a director and his huge influence on me personally, and if you want to call it artistically, super. He's such he was such an amazing director, and again, it's like for me with Kubrick, it runs really deep. It's not just where it's an entertainment thing. I feel like he's a, for me, he's one of my personal heroes. He's, one of those figures. We all have people like that in our life where, we look up to, or they, maybe it's a particular writer, or, in this case, it's a director, or a musician, or a band, or, somebody who is, who just plays a pivotal role in kind of shaping someone's worldview, or just how they kind of function every day, or what they aspire to be. And Kubrick is one of those people. He is one of, aside from me just really loving his films, for me he's just generally inspiring in every way. And the thing too, getting back to film, aside from him being an obvious influence on my kind of personal philosophy, I when I've been doing a series, all of these videos. What I've been trying to do is cover all of his movies. I did I've done pretty decent amount of cover. I did a show on The Shining. I did Full Metal Jacket. I believe I did a show on Eyes Wide Shut. What I'm trying to do with this whole series is basically cover all of his films. For me they're all amazing, and they're all just, classics. And I also recently did a show on 2001: A Space Odyssey. And the interesting thing is, for me too, keeping in step with film, I've always said, my favorite two genres are horror and science fiction. And getting back to Kubrick, for me, it's like my favorite Kubrick film of all time, the one I kind of always go back to, is The Shining. And that, I feel, at the end of the day, is probably the greatest horror movie ever made. And when I did the show on 2001: A Space Odyssey, I realized, wow, there's, again, horror and science fiction are, they're tremendously crowded with just amazing films, amazing directors, amazing pieces of literature, amazing authors. The list is endless. But I was like, you know what? I think it's the same thing for me. I feel like 2001 overall, in its scope and its range and its impact, just within the film world, but just But then also on the outskirts or outside of that, culturally, I feel like 2001 is probably the greatest science fiction movie ever made. So it's even, a deeper, more. It just draws me in even more. My love of his work. And today, I'm going to be doing a show. And so what I'm trying to do is cover all of his movies. And today, I'm going to do a show on probably. We all have our favorites. With Kubrick, I love all of his work. I've always said on his incredible body of work how he was so. I feel like throughout his career and throughout his exploration of kind of different genres, with a film like, say, Paths of Glory, which is a war movie, Spartacus, which is more or less based on like historical, uh, you know, facts or a time in history. Barry Lyndon, a really amazing period piece. Eyes Wide Shut, which is kind of a film about, to a degree, dark erotica and horror. The Shining, science fiction, 2001. So many different genres he explored throughout his career, but the consistency of all of those films are just amazing. To me, you can put on any of his films, and they're all fresh. They're all timeless classics. And it's always astounding to me how just throughout his career, everything, his whole body of work is just really consistent. And I've talked about that before, because some directors, if you just at face value compare, like, and again, this is a matter of opinion, but if you compare, like, Kubrick to, like, say, Steven Spielberg or, Ridley Scott, both two directors I really love, but with I think with Kubrick, I mean with Spielberg and definitely Ridley Scott, I feel like there's certain periods or stages in their career that were just astoundingly good, and then after certain periods, it there's a lot of misfires, a lot of missteps, and I think those are due to lots of there's a lot of reasons as to probably why that happened. So, whereas I feel like with Kubrick, you can just go 1 through 10. You can go through all of his complete list of films that he directed, and it's all just incredibly consistent. But today's show is probably on, and again, it's all you always have your natural movies that if you love a director, you kind of always have your the films that you go back to or the films that you've seen the most, and you kind of more or less have a list of films that are your favorites. And for me, I do have that for Kubrick. The Shining's always been my favorite, but I kind of feel like Lolita is probably my second favorite. Just a masterpiece of a film. It came out in 1962, starring James Mason, Shelley Winters, and Peter Sellers. Just an incredible movie. With Kubrick, and especially with this movie, he, I feel, as a director, really was pushing the boundaries a lot with a lot of his films, and also exploring the human psychology and pushing those boundaries and exploring taboos. And I feel with Lolita, that is a prime example of that. I kind of feel like if this movie came out today, it would be probably picketed in. I think there would be various groups that would stop it from trying to. They would that would try to stop this movie from coming out if it was to come out today. And obviously, this movie deals with some heavy duty taboos, and it's a very dark, you know, expose of basically a character who falls in love with an underage girl and all of that can entail and kind of the downward spiral that envelops these characters. But it's just an incredible story. The original book, which is actually one of my favorite, kind of one of my favorite books of all time. I saw that I've seen Lolita a whole bunch of times. I unfortunately do not own it, which is terrible. I need to buy it on Blu-ray. I just haven't come across it. I will. It's on. It's definitely on my radar. I don't know why I don't own it, but I've seen it a whole ton of times on DVD. I think I remember seeing it once or twice on cable. But the original novel, which was written by Vladimir Nabokov, is one of my favorite books of all time. I remember when I first saw Lolita, it just my jaw dropped, and I was just like, "Wow!" Like, I can't believe this movie really took a deep dive in exploring this taboo of essentially a character study of somebody who is a pedophile, more or less, and just how complex it is, and just such a dark tale, almost like a cautionary tale, and just how incredibly controversial it is. And I remember, I think I had seen, I saw Lolita, Kubrick's version, and then I was just enamored with it and fascinated with it and just blown away. And I think within that year, I went out and I bought the book because I had heard that the book was, just incredible and just really a deep, taboo subject that it really tackled heavily or dealing with an incredibly taboo subject and just really dove into it. And it's one of my favorite books of all time. And I remember like around that period when when I got the book and I was really into the movie. I've read the book a few times, and I remember recommending the book to a friend, and she was really into film at the time. We used to watch a lot of movies together. She liked Kubrick quite a bit, and I remember telling her, "Oh, you should really check out Lolita. I mean, it's I think it's one of his best works. It's very different from anything that he's ever done, and the book especially is just incredible." And I remember saying it's one of those examples of where, you know, the book and the movie are both so fantastic, and they're a little bit different. Nabokov, the author of the novel, also helped write the screenplay for Lolita, and I remember letting my friend borrow the book, and she got like I don't know maybe a chapter into it, and she was disgusted with it, and she's like, I can't read this, I can't I can't stick with this, and it was because of the subject matter. And she gave it back to me, and I don't think she ever saw the movie. So I understand that. I understand that there is, um, people have a thing where they have a certain threshold, and it will bother them, and I can understand that not willing to go there. But I also feel that at the end of the day, it's a prejudice that I think is unfortunate, but it's a prejudice or a hang up to a degree that will impede your growth and your learning to a degree. I understand that people have a certain threshold for certain things. I've always had a pretty high threshold, but I understand those those perimeters or those personal boundaries. But I think at the end of the day, it kind of impedes on your growth and expanding yourself and learning new ideas, for what it is. I had that happen a while back with somebody I know who, where I had recommended this documentary to somebody. It's a really, really great documentary, but it's very, very intense and it's kind of hard to watch. And it's called Lake of Fire. And it came out maybe like 10 or 12 years ago, but it's just an incredible documentary. And basically, that documentary explores the whole topic of abortion. It doesn't have a stance. The documentary does not have a stance. It basically gives the viewpoint from a lot of different angles. And it's very interesting. It's kind of a gut wrenching movie, but very, very well done. And it really, I think, with a subject like that is highly personal, it does such a great job with just giving not its, it doesn't have its agenda whether or not you should be pro life or this or that. It just gives a variety of opinions and views, and it just presents it to you, and you have your free will to agree with this or that or not at all. And I remember recommending it to another friend at that time, and she was like, "Nope, if I refuse to see it because if it goes away outside of the idea that, well, I believe a woman's right to choose and it is her body, so I will not listen to any other perspective outside of that. I draw a line in the sand with that." So she wouldn't watch the movie and just completely shut it down. So, and I think that and again, people can have their thresholds of where they cut things off and where they feel, only they'll go to certain places or explore certain things, only enough to where, or within the perimeters of where they feel comfortable. And I, totally agree with that and support that. But as the example I use for, Lake of Fire and, the incredibly taboo subject that it tackles, but and controversial. And, my friend just having her views, but seeing that this film, or didn't even see it, but me expressing that it does show many different, it shows that subject through many different angles. If it didn't, because it doesn't align with her specific thing, she disregards it. And, that's fine. I understand. But I feel like you have to be open. We don't live in a world that really promotes that, but it's great to have an open mind and to be able to be able to listen to different sides, even if you completely disagree. So, but anyway, it's interesting. I have a pretty high threshold for those kinds of things. I like to think, and I don't know, to a degree, I think it's a good attribute to have, but just because, you're always, you're trying to grow, hopefully, and you're trying to, you never stop learning and developing, so you're trying to learn new ideas and be able to have dialogue. I think when it comes to social political things, you can have, if you kind of know what the other person is about, or maybe you completely disagree with them, but it helps if you are willing to at least, you know, get a synopsis of their perspective. So if you're going to have a debate or a conversation about it, you kind of know where they're coming from, even though you don't necessarily have to agree with them in any way, shape, or form. It has nothing to do with whether really or not really you agree with them or not. It's just about that perspective. So, and in a way too, if you're into thinking of things where you're gonna like kind of debate that person in a pretty respectful way, you can also look at it as that is ammunition that you can use. to a degree. So it's, I don't know, it's an interesting thing. There was a I just actually just saw that there was another remake of Lolita. I just happened to see too that there was, I guess, a new remake or a new version of Lolita that just came out this year, and I think it's some. It was put out by some kind of streaming platform. So interesting. Um, there is a version of Lolita that came out quite a few years ago, and it stars Jeremy Irons. That I think it was a Showtime original or a Showtime production, and I remember being it's really good too. I saw it. I remember it was out for. It came out. What year did it come? It came out quite a few years ago, 1997. That's hard to believe, but it's again, it's a Adrian Lin who directed it, who also did back in the day Fatal Attraction, which is pretty wild. He directed a Showtime production of Lolita, and it came out in '97. Stars Jeremy Irons, and it's really good. I didn't see it when it was on cable, but I do. It did get a release, a DVD or Blu-ray release, and it's really really good. It's pretty true to the story, and it's very they didn't really sanitize the story or the subject matter for that matter, but it's very very good. And it's probably my second favorite Kubrick film of all time. I love the black and white. It's such a James Mason is just so incredible in it. Um, Peter Sellers is just amazing in it. Um, and it's just such a primetime example of how and why Kubrick was such a master, such a master. You know, just incredible. The cast, everything about it is just astounding. Of course, Shelley Winters, just just amazing. One of her best roles. Such an iconic actress, but just incredible. And I really, I really recommend if you haven't seen Lolita. The Jeremy Irons one, like I said, is one that came out in '97. The original came out in '67, but I highly recommend, especially the Kubrick version. Definitely see it. The Jeremy Irons version is amazing too. And definitely read the book. I think it's one of those rare things. You always hear that as a topic of discussion about movies that are adapted for out of from a book or um, a graphic novel or whatnot. And a lot of the times for people and for for the public, it's just not as good as the source material. But I think there's definitely exceptions to that. I think some stories, some books I can think of off the top of my head. Well, Dune, for instance, my favorite science fiction book of all time. I really love the adaptations of with David Lynch, and then there was a few other adaptations of that amazing book throughout the years. But I definitely feel the best version of that story is Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Just amazing. And I think another story and book that I really love is Children of Men, which is a really great sci-fi movie that came out a few years back now. But the book, the original novel, is just awesome, and they're both different experiences, but they're very very good. The film really pays tribute to the story in a really, really great way. And I think, this is Lolita is an example of that same kind of thing of where you can get something a little bit different. I feel like the movie is incredibly close to the book, but they're both just incredible pieces of art, and I definitely recommend you know checking all of those things out. So this is Jason Dean, and this is the next series of getting into and covering all of the all of the glorious movies of Stanley Kubrick. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.